What's up, y'all? It is Addul Ali. You're checking out the Urban Conservative. It is a Saturday night. It is exclusive interview time here on the Urban Conservative. Ladies and gentlemen, I had a wonderful opportunity to sit down with a brother out of New Hanover County named Ashley Strand, who has a podcast, has a show, has a group called the New Hanover County A-Team, a bunch of patriots, Republicans, conservatives, wanting to get the word out about what's happening in their county and to share conservatism in New Hanover County. So I was honored and thrilled to have the opportunity to sit with the brother. Tonight, special edition, we're going to go ahead and play that interview for you here on the Urban Conservative for your enjoyment. Again, this is me joining Ashley Strand in the New Hanover County A-Team for a special interview. Hope you guys enjoy it. If we are going to continue to be the party of Lincoln, if we're going to continue to be the party of Frederick Douglass, if we're going to continue to be the party that fought for the right to vote and ended slavery and did all those great things, that doesn't happen sitting on the couch. You don't have the luxury of complaining of how bad the GOP is if you sat your narrow black tail or white tail or whatever tail it is at the house. You don't get the luxury of that complaint.
And we are live. Well, we're recorded, but we are live. Welcome to the NHCA team. This is episode 8. Today, we have our most illustrious guest to date. If I may read your credit, sir, we have the former chair of Caribous County GOP, the current chair of the North Carolina Black Conservative Voices Coalition, the operations director of the Frederick Douglass Foundation of North Carolina, the former chair of Kannapolis Community Development Commission, and current candidate for NCGOP vice chair. And if I may add one credit to your list, and this is the one that gives you the most grassroots cred, you are the 5th guest on the NHCA team.
Okay, well, look, I'll take it. Glad to be here. Thank you for having me, brother. Thank you.
It's a great honor. It's a great honor. Now you have a podcast called The Urban Conservative. You co-host it with your brother,
This is
Ramin Soto, who is also active in Republican politics in Suffolk County, New York. And according to your website, says it reached over 1 million people in the U.S. last year, 5 million people internationally. Is that correct? Or wait, it's going to reach 5 million in 2023.
That's the goal. That's the plan. One thing, great introduction. I'll get you a check in the mail so that you can do that introduction for me everywhere I go. But Cabarrus County, everybody gets it mixed up. It's Cabarrus County.
Cabarrus.
So everybody said because
I made it like a grill.
Carabas.
I turned it into an Italian food chain.
We have a great, come on down. We've got great restaurants, but the Urban Conservative is my twin brother and I's podcast and platform. Really, it's a company we started as a way to help share our conservative values and principles that we didn't know that we had our entire lives into urban communities. Something I think that's really important.
Yeah, well, I think it's an incredible, first of all, I listened to a bunch of episodes this week. It's a great show, and I think it's very accessible, but also very informative, which I think is a very difficult balance to strike. You know, politics can be very dry and very off-putting, but it's an enjoyable show. And I think I would recommend it to anyone. Now, before we dive into everything, what I found most compelling was your story. But on the other hand, you're running for vice chair of the GOP of North Carolina. Can I give you a chance to get your elevator pitch out of the way? So, you know, for people who want to know where we're ending up with this, we don't put it behind digging into the backstory.
Okay, so you want me to give them the why I'm running for vice chair's elevator
Yeah.
pitch real quick? So look, there's a couple of reasons. The first and most important reason to me is I feel like that's what God has called me to do, and how I feel like He's called me to serve Him through my activity in the GOP. My faith is important to me. I'm a Christian, and I believe that that's the first and foremost reason. But I've spent the last 6 years working and serving the GOP, 2 terms as a Cabarrus County Republican Party executive committee member and a term as chairman. And, obviously you've mentioned some of the other work that I've done, but what I've come to realize is that the GOP has to become competitive in our urban areas, in our Raleighs, in our Durhams, in our Charlottes, in our Greensboros, in our Winston-Salems. We have to get into these areas and convey our conservative values, and not just the values, but the benefits of conservative governance and policies to these communities in a way that they understand it. I think that a big part of our GOP, we have these shared values, these principles, but a big part of the reason why I'm running is because we need to do a better job of communicating them. And I think that's something that I bring to the table. If I might, Brother Ashley, the other major part of this is I've seen and I've had an opportunity to work with the modern GOP, the way modern politics works. And I think we need a change of leadership up there that can bring some fresh eyes and new ideas to how we're communicating as a party. When we look at North Carolina being predominantly unaffiliated voters, what's driving that, and how do we bring folks back to the party? And that's what I want to focus on as the vice chair.
Excellent, excellent. And there's some stuff there I want to follow up on for sure.
Hmm.
I'm pretty new to North Carolina politics. I was involved in a school board race down in North Carolina, and as you may know, we managed to take all 4 open seats for the GOP in 2022. So that was successful, but pretty steep learning curve. And I'm very interested to hear what you have to say about how the GOP leadership needs to change its communication style and who it talks to. And you have this great acronym for urban on your site, which is understanding reality beyond assumed narratives. Is that it?
That's it. You can take that A in urban and assumed all or any narratives, which is really how my brother and I started this. We started it as a way of us going through this discovery of our own political ideology of what we actually are. And what we found out at every turn is that we'd been fed these narratives. The narrative that the white man is out to get the black man. We were fed the narrative that the country was founded on the premise of oppressing people of color. The police are out to hunt you. You think about the movies, and the police are out on the hunt and you're the prey. We were fed all of these narratives, and we had to learn how to go in one by one and be really, really honest with ourselves and say, this ain't right. These narratives aren't right. And even to the extent where we found that there's some narrative creation on the right, we've got to be willing to fight against that as well. So I think that for us, the urban in that is part of that is we're hip hop culture. Like urban, like that's the light. I grew up in hip hop. That's what my brother and I grew up in. So with that comes a certain paradigm and a worldview and a way of looking at things. How we say keeping it real. And that's what we were trying to do, is keep it all the way real. Are these Republicans really racist? Are all the Democrats really trying to, rely on us to be uninformed and misinformed voters? And a lot of what, in these current years, we're seeing what people think are conspiracies are more often true. Reality is often stranger than fiction, they say.
Yeah, and one of the things that happens is something can be going on, but you don't necessarily know where it's going on. In other words, where people might assume the latent racism exists in the Republican Party is not necessarily where the Republican Party is telling you it is.
That is a very interesting way to put that. I like that. Yeah.
Let's come back to that if
Sure.
we have time. I'm fascinated by your story, and if I may read something from your website, just because to me, there's so much contained in this statement from your website that I'd love to tease out. I think people who are thinking about voting for you would benefit from knowing this story. So if I may, I want to read this and dig into it. Is that okay with you? Very good.
Works for me.
Addul and Rahim were born to a teenage mother during the beginning of the 1980s drug epidemic in New York City. Separated for most of their childhood in different foster homes, group homes, and juvenile detention facilities, the twins eventually reunited. The show started as a way for them to share their journey through the system, the military, the entertainment industry, and politics that led them to become entrepreneurs and leaders in the conservative movement. Now, listening to your show, one of the things that people who haven't listened will absolutely love is the extraordinary chemistry between you and your brother. You guys are a great team. You're kind of the more serious one. He's kind of the goofier, more risque one. And you keep things on track. And he goes, "Wait a minute, hold, sir, sir." I love how he stops you and says, "Sir, you have this extraordinary chemistry that to me, I can't imagine, it doesn't go all the way back to the beginning." And when I read that little synopsis that just contains so much in it, it seems to me that in a way your journey has been a series of extraordinary trials unfolding in decreasing order of difficulty. So how old were you, if you don't mind my asking, when and those steps would be then being separated, going through the system, the military, the entertainment industry, and then politics. So how old were you when you were separated from your brother, and was that the most difficult part of your journey?
So when my brother and I were born, my mom kept us for maybe 3 or 4 months, and then she turned us over to the system in New York City. We were placed into a very, very loving foster home, and if we have time, the way God works is we ended up 40 something years later getting back with the lady who we were in the foster home with. But from the time we were 3 months old until the time we were about 5.5 years old, we lived in this loving foster home together. And that's when our father came, my biological father came and took us out of that foster home. We made it with him for about a year, but the abuse and some of the things that were happening in that household led the social services system to put us into different facilities. So from the time we were about, 6 or 7 to the time we were about 14, we were separated pretty much. The last place that we were was a place upstate New York called LaSalle School for Boys. And so I'm on one side of the facility, my brother's on the other side. We kind of get to see each other when we have shared dinners, or, we're out there and on the basketball court or playing or school or whatever the case may be. But um, the interesting thing about it, and when you ask, I never thought was that the most difficult part, being separated from my brother. I think in retrospect, I could look back at it and say the most difficult part was actually not just being separated from him, but also from my older sister, because we had an older sister as well. My mom had three of us. So yes, in being separated from him for the twin thing, but also having no siblings around at all, because we were taken away from our sister too. The system took all three of us. So I think
Have
now
you
in
managed
retrospect.
to reunite with your sister?
Yeah, we got back with our sister. We have a great relationship with her now. My brother and I, outside of the family, my brother's, the wife and kids, my brother's usually the first person I talk to in the morning, last person I talk to before I go to bed at night. We don't make life decisions without each other. I pretty much know what he's eating for dinner every day. And, we've grown that type of relationship. And I think, to your point, and I appreciate that, it kind of comes through in the podcast. And I'll tell you one of the most difficult points, and I remember this, is when we started kind of going through crime statistics, because we were dealing with this idea that all the police were bad and they were against black people, right? We had got to this actual point in our kind of study, and we're like, all right, so now we got to deal with this police thing. And as we started going through looking at arrest statistics, report statistics, sentencing, like, we started just this deep dive, And there was a day where we had like this flashback moment, Ashley, and it was one of the toughest things. And I had to come to terms with every bad idea that I got. Every negative idea that I got was from somebody that looked like me, that told me to do something bad. Every interaction that I had had with the police, I played all of them back in my head. 99.99999% of them was me doing something stupid. So, and that was a really tough pill to swallow because I'm like, no, they gotta be out to get me. The man's gotta be. And I'm like, well, no, that time I didn't have insurance. I was driving around with people, and nope, that time I was out doing something. Well, nope, that time I was doing, things that wouldn't have happened had I been in the car with somebody with a driver's license and insurance and So for me, that was one of the most difficult parts, was getting to a point of being able to accept accountability for not having the right ideas and not thinking the right way, and then being willing to change that and accept that I was wrong about the way I was viewing the world.
Did that just couple things that came up there, and I'll do them in reverse order. That moment of taking responsibility. So I had my own struggles with addiction. And I remember a similar moment of looking back at all the interactions that I had had bitterness about and reframing them as, I had a moment where I realized how much people had actually been taking care of me my whole life, in a very different set of circumstances, but I hadn't been remembering all the times that I'd been given breaks by people,
Right.
So I know for me that shift, taking responsibility in that way and looking at my own past honestly, removed a lot of anger and bitterness from my life. And that's one thing that I find so striking about you and your brother, is that in the midst of all the outrages that are going on, and having had such trials when you were younger, you're both men who are full of joy. And I think that's important in public life. I'm fearful of angry leaders.
I'll agree. And it's funny, if you don't mind, you mentioned something, well, my biological mom picked me up from LaSalle and brought me home from Albany, New York, out to Long Island, where she lived. The very first place that she brought us, well, me, that night, was to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting. And I still to this day use that prayer, God grant me the courage to accept the things I cannot change, the wisdom to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That prayer. I still pray that prayer all the time. That has been such a value to me. And one of the things is going through this journey, both politically, coming to my knowledge of that, and then growing as a man, I really appreciate the value of that prayer. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you mentioned the study. How did the study start? It sounds like a shared practice with your brother. How and when did this start? And wouldn't it be great if more brothers got together and studied together
well, I
to
gotta
figure out the
give
world?
right. I gotta give all of the credit to the good brothers over at St. John's Lodge number 204 in Kannapolis. So throughout the 2007, 6-ish, something like that, I got into Freemasonry. I was kind of like on this self exploration journey of what's true religion, and I got into Freemasonry, and I learned so much about leadership and public speaking and the liberal arts and sciences, and it kind of made me hungry for history. And I became a leader in the lodge, and what I learned in the lodge taught me how to learn. And so I had this just innate thirst to know things, and Freemasonry had given me, because I didn't go to college, but it gave me kind of a framework to look at things through. And so I when we started looking, like I ordered the autobiography of Frederick Douglass, the advent of YouTube and Google and all that stuff coming up. So, we would just do things like, okay, what's political science? Go down to the library. This is before the internet. We'd go down there and find what's a political science book? Okay, so you got to know, all of these different things. I'm sorry, I'm getting interrupted. You got to know all of these different parts to politics, economics, biology, chemistry, religion, psychology, psychiatry. So we were just like, okay, so now I got to go. I'll give you a little secret what we used to do. So Yale, all of these.
Jack, to interject. Now, your brother was with you in North Carolina at the time because he's currently
No, he's in New York. We're doing this on the phone.
I love it.
We're
So
calling
you
each
get
other on the phone
with this lodge, and you go, "Hey, I got into this thing. I can't keep it to myself."
Well, there was a few years where he didn't have anything to do with that. That was just me on this journey through the lodge. And then when we got to this political point, and we both have this dialogue, we're like, so let me back up if I might. Let me give you the drop. So I had been the worshipful master of my lodge, served on the Community Development Commission. I'm in the Rotary Club one Tuesday on a Rotary Club lunch, just minding my business. Only Black guy in the Rotary that day, right? There's a couple of other Black members in the Rotary, but they weren't there that day. And I was just remarking to myself how I was the only Black guy at the Rotary. And then I'll never forget this, Ashley. I looked down and I was like, why am I the only Black guy? And why do I have both fried chicken and watermelon on my plate? I'll never, like, that was the thought that I had. And then Tom, my guy Tom, walks over to me, city councilman in Kannapolis. He walks over to me and he looks at me dead face. He's a big guy, a big white guy. He looks at me, he goes, yo, Addul, brother, you're a Republican. Not only that, you're a conservative Republican. I said, what? He goes, no, listen to me. You're a conservative Republican, word for word. He goes, every time I see you, you're on a lawnmower or a ladder. I had a landscaping business and a tow truck, so I was always working, right? So every time I see you, you're on a lawnmower or a ladder. You're a veteran. You served in the, United States Army. You care about your family. You serve this community. You care about this country, my dude. You are a conservative Republican, bro. Okay, whatever. That's the night I go back and I tell my brother what this guy said to me. And it was like then I find out his girl is a Republican. His wife is a Republican, works on the board of election, didn't know Heather. So now this floodgate opens up and I find Frederick Douglass was a Republican. All of the first, like we start that basic search. And then it's like, what else didn't we know? What else of, the lie of omission didn't they tell us? So then it became, all right, well, we can't even get into politics now. Now I got to learn if I even know what the words mean. So we started relearning how to read grammar, rhetoric, logic, arithmetic. Like I said, the lodge had given me a framework to view things. So we took that same framework and we looked at politics and I deconstructed it. And I said, all right, so first of all, we have to identify our own values. I'm not with certain things that the Democrats, I know I'm not a Democrat. I know I'm not that. I need to figure out if I'm actually a Republican. So that's where we kind of dove in and got involved. But the fact of the matter is, when we really, really peel back the layers of what politics is, what we really found out is it was a matter of showing up. That was all it really boiled down to for us, was like, wait a minute, hold on. So let me get this straight. I walked into this Community Development Commission meeting my first meeting thinking these people were something special. They bleed gold when they cut them. They walk on water. These people weren't no smarter than me. They didn't read any better than I did. They just happened to know when and where to show up. So, that became our thing. Was I started going to city council meetings and listening and learning and asking questions. And one of the secrets I was going to give, it's not really a secret, but I'll tell you this. What we would do is we would go on YouTube. Yale, Harvard, all of these Ivy League schools had their political science courses online, right? So what we would do is we paused the screen at the syllabus and we ordered all the books off the syllabus. So we would read what, Kant and we'd read all of this stuff, and, the Communist Manifesto and, just all of these things, this literature, political science literature, and we just kind of just dove deep into it. And where we landed at was essentially like, we belong in the Republican Party. The Republican Party, for lack of a better way to say it, belongs to people like me, to people like my brother. We should be leading it. We should be having a say in the direction of the party. We should be contributing to the platform and the ideas and all that thing.
So let me ask you this. Now, I believe in 2020, and you'll remember for years and years, all the pundits said, if Black vote can go over 10%, Republicans will never lose another presidential election. Well, in 2020, I think it went over 12%, and we know what happened then, or maybe we don't know what happened.
Yeah,
but
that part.
But not to get into that. That's a whole other discussion. what do you think, and I think this is true of a lot of minority communities. What do you think the unrealized conservative potential is in the Black community? What percentage of Blacks in America do you think? And I mean, I'm asking you to speak for an entire demographic. I mean, I think you just had, your brother would be losing his mind right now going, we're all human beings, this is,
Yeah.
you're Irish, you're not white. So, but, we're speaking in these broad terms. What is your sense of how much latent, unrealized conservatism there is in the Black community? Because,
Well, there's a lot.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish.
Well, okay. So when I had first got into the politics in New Hanover, I had someone go to me, we shouldn't even bother going into the Black communities. And I'm thinking, but everyone's leaving that on the table then.
Right.
So why, like in chess, you never give up a free piece, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my connection to it. But where do you think it is? I mean, what do you think it really is?
So I think there's a Shelby Steele. I don't know if you know who Shelby Steele is. Black economist, writer. He said, if we continue on this path, we can do away with this victim mentality that's in certain aspects of the minority community in the next 20 years. I think that to your point, when we talk in general terms, I think there's a lot of latent conservatism in minority communities. But again, I circle back to this, the way we go about messaging our policy benefits isn't, and it's less to me, it's less about Black and white more so than it is urban, suburban. When we look at the numbers and what we're finding out is it's really, we got to come off of the country clubs a little bit. The country clubs are cool. We need that money. I'm down with the donor class, but we really got to get down to the worker class. The Democrats have done a way better job of convincing the working everyday person that they are for them, most specifically in the minority community. So one of the things, to your point, that you mentioned earlier, and I'm so proud of the work that we've done with the Frederick Douglass Foundation and other groups to move that needle here in North Carolina, is really the demographic that I think we need to be focusing on as Black men. And I'll tell you why. When we look at Second Amendment rights, when we look at criminal justice reform, and we look at economics, those are three of the big hot button issues. When we talk about the pro-life issue, one of the things that we've saw is that that is a very difficult conversation to have in the minority community among minority females, especially given the way that the left has framed the pro-life, pro-choice conversation. I think one of the other things we need to look at, especially in these minority communities, and we as conservatives have to stand on the facts. We can't let the emotional side of the argument get away from this. So the actual poverty rate right around in North Carolina for African Americans is right around 20%. That means 80 nationally, the poverty rate for African Americans is like 34, 35%. Might be on a good day, I'll give you 40. Now, I'm not saying that that's nothing to, that's not a serious issue, but that means 60% or thereabouts of Black folk are doing just fine. So we have to do away with this idea that there's this massive doing bad of Black people in America. One. Two, great author, somebody I look up to, has a lot to do with the way that I view the world now, is Thomas Sowell. And one of the things he's been able to do is we haven't put slavery and the residual effects of slavery in a context and had this conversation in and amongst Black people in a real substantive way. If you look now, just look at the recent funeral for George Floyd and who showed up there, and the Al Sharpton talking about all of the stuff he talks about. I call it the ASS syndrome. I don't want to curse on your podcast, but I call it the AS syndrome. And I call it the Al Sharpton syndrome that we're dealing with, because you have these people who continue to perpetuate this idea that you don't have equal access to opportunity in this country, when the facts are just blazing in front of your face, back-to-back biracial president, back-to-back black secretaries of state, 2 black sitting associate justices on the Supreme Court. You have more black mayors and chiefs and police people than you've ever had. We've got black senators. We've got majority of the NFL and NBA are black. Like, so this idea, and I think a big part of that problem is we have to be willing as conservatives to go into these urban centers and claim some of that territory and say, look, the reason you're doing so good is because of the policies we're putting forth. One other thing on that, if I might, I think that the Republican Party proper, and this is something we've been working to fix, has to have a culture that accepts people into it, which is why for the last 3 years, the North Carolina Black Conservative Voices gets a suite at the convention that y'all can help us sponsor if you're interested in doing that. But what that does is that gives African-American conservatives something to come to convention for, something that culturally feels like them. We do Motown night on Friday night. We do like hip hop and R&B night on Saturday night or some variation of that. But we had to, a few years back before we started the Black Conservative Voices, when the Frederick Douglass was running the Black Engagement Coalition, that was the number one thing we heard from the Blexit folks and from different, minority groups, conservative groups, as the party has to have a culture that feels like us. Well, we have to go about being the leaders in the party and creating that culture. I'm not saying we ghetto everything. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I like Earth, Wind, and Fire, bro. I like Biggie, bro. I listen to Tupac. I'm coming to the convention, but once you start giving me too much of the stuff that I don't like, I'm gonna opt out of everything else. So why not create a place for us to come and feel culturally accepted? I'll tell you this. I'll end here. What you'll find when you come to the Black Voices Suite is everybody sitting there partying and having a good time. Everybody comes in there and we line dancing and we're dominoes and spades and everybody has a good time.
You're probably making a lot of white people very happy. They're like, wait, I can go in this room and dance too.
Oh, listen, if you do it on beat, off beat, I don't care.
Ways,
just
right?
come in here and have some fun with us. But at the same token, these are people that we want to show. And this is part of, to your point about how much latent potential there is in minority communities. I think that our conversation should not be about getting people, and this is going to get me in trouble with some people, but we're talking about a community and not just Black. I don't want just to be around Black and minority, but in urban communities, the Charlottes of the world. You take the last 2 years, right? I give flowers where they're due. They busted their hump in Charlotte to try to make an impact there. And I think we can do a better job as a state party of going into these urban communities, giving them the resources they need, helping them come up with marketing strategies and solutions and events that'll put them in the room with these unaffiliated voters, which is what we need to do. So I think that, the latent potential is there in minority communities, but I think we need to broaden that focus to urban communities as well.
Absolutely. And, I like where you're going there, and I just want to follow up on it a little bit.
Sure,
so you were kind of talking about bringing people into political culture in between elections, but then when you get into the election season, then it's a whole different set of challenges. You have time pressure. You're asking them for a specific thing, set of votes, etc. And you said they did a great job in 2022. They pushed hard. What are some of so how do you deploy the strategies you were talking about in terms of these day-to-day strategies of making it a welcoming environment for all different kinds of people, not just whoever the in group who usually happens to run whatever county GOP is? It's always some group of people who, are in some sense protecting that culture. So you talked about opening that up. How do you transfer that and plan to transfer that into the election season? What does your door knocking look like? What does your community engagement look like? What are these strategies?
So there's a couple of things. One, I think that, and I don't want to talk, I don't know how heavy shop you want to talk here, but one of the things we got to look one of the things we have to look at is economic self-sufficiency here in North Carolina for our NCGOP. I'm proud of my work as a chairman. I raised tens and tens of, I think over the 2 years, almost $100,000 locally for my county party. That's without getting money from the state or people from out of state or anything like that. That was all money we raised locally. I think we need to focus once we can get our internal fundraising together and not be at the whim of the RNC for the bulk of our funds, I think we can control our internal direction a little bit better. And I would love to see that focus there. Now, I do think we have to understand that the RNC is a wonderful partner, and I think there's some value that they bring to the table. I really enjoyed working with the RNC victory teams as a chairman. They were very, very helpful. And I think we need to be training our chairman in how to work with the resources and the people that we have there. So to the other point about door knocking and that kind of thing, one of the things we look at is our election is in June for vice chair. You know, all of this stuff is happening in June. We're not waiting until then. We're actually going out into communities now. And a big part of that is not going out there just asking for votes, you know, 3-4 months before the election. It's going out and let me kind of break this down for you the way I kind of view it, and this may be helpful. So I tend to look at this operationally as we have 3 tiers of people, right? So your tier 1 people are your politicos, your elected officials. These are the folks that are going to run for party office. You know, they know all about politics. They're your, you know, elected officials, state level, federal folks. Those are your tier 1 people. Now we have something called tier 2, and this is where we do a lot of focus. Okay. And tier 2 are your local folks. They may run a nonprofit, they may run an NGO. They are highly respected in the community, but not political enough to run for office. They know the mayor, they know the city councilman, they may not know that person, but they have a lot of respect in the community. When they do an event, 100 or 200 people show up. When they say something, the community listens. And then you have your tier 3 people. Your tier 3 people are what we call your everyday Joe. They don't care about politics. They don't want to know nothing about politics. They're normally going to listen to the tier 2 person. Okay. And what we have to do a better job of is, one, identifying those tier 2 people, becoming solutionologist for those tier 2 people in these communities that we haven't engaged with. We were able to do that in certain races across the state in 2022. When we look at some of our state house races, and what we need to be able to do is let them see our conservatism as a direct benefit to them. Solve small problems. You know, kids need after school program. You know, after school program needs some uniforms for a kid. You're going to spend $10,000 and give it to a candidate. Why not spend 2,000 and get this local guy? I don't care that he's a Democrat. He's he's helping the community. But what we have to do is build those relationships with those open-minded tier 2 people that are willing to come in and help us and say, hey, you're right about this. You're right. We do need to build a relationship between the community and the police. You're right. We do need to be looking at, taking the CRT and the transgender stuff out of our classrooms and things of that nature. So for me, it becomes a matter of helping our local parties identify those tier 2 people, teaching and training them how to develop those relationships. In some cases, this is going to freak out some of my conservative friends, but there is a need for cultural sensitivity. You understand? Not everybody grows up the same way. You can't say things to certain people that you might be able to say to another group of people, and knowing those nuances. And I'll give you one real quick. I teach people, don't say you don't see color. That's offensive. I'm clearly brown, okay? Like, don't tell me you don't see color. What you mean to say is you treat people according to their character, not the color of their skin. Say that. We'll get that, and you'll avoid a little bit of tension in your conversation. Because I'm telling you, once you say that to a black person, we're tapping out. We're like, all right, we might act like we're listening to you, but we're not listening to you no more. So little things like that is what we do to go in and teach our conservative folks. But I think it really revolves around understanding how we build relationships with those tier 2 people in these communities where we haven't been able to do that before, and that's kind of how we do that.
One of the things that came up in that for me was something I've observed in the Republican Party, which is interesting because it's this issue of putting identity over policy sometimes, because what you were talking about just there was a very practical approach. Look, we're going to go in, we're going to identify issues in the community that need to be addressed and find the movers and the shakers in the community who want to be a part of that, regardless of who's trying to get it done, because it's a problem that needs to be addressed. And one of the things that I've observed, which is odd, because generally, we get angry at the Democrats for being these identity politics people. But one of the things I've encountered is as much as the Republican Party wants to expand and grow their base, one of the biggest things you find going on within the Republican Party is people counting how long the other people in the party have been Republicans. And
Yeah.
it's, and it's like, wait,
Yeah.
wait, what if we did a thought experiment where we said, hey, what if everyone in the country who revered the Bill of Rights voted together? Well, but how long is this person? I don't care how long they've been a. Right now, there's a pretty clear distinction between the
Mm.
party that is the representative of tyranny and censorship and central control and all this stuff, and one party that at least has some elements of it that are fighting to defend liberty. I've had that experience. Have you had that experience?
Well, I think one of the things is, and I have had that experience actually. I had a young lady who ran as a Democrat a few years back for city council now, for school board, right? Now, keep in mind, 25 years ago in Cabarrus County, there was no Republican Party. Everybody was a Democrat in Cabarrus County. Now, they might have been what we call blue dog or yellow dog Democrats, where they're pro Second Amendment, pro life, pro gun, they were those guys. But now, they're I'll say this. I had the experience of Slady runs as a Democrat for school board. She loses barely, okay? Barely loses. It wasn't Democrats that called her the next day. It was Republicans. And she told me she will break down in tears when she tells you this story. It was Republicans that called her and said, you know, you're not a Democrat. You know how conservative you are. Come on over, be a part of the party. This lady then comes to the next convention, gets elected to the executive committee, and becomes one of the hardest working Republicans we had over the last 2 years on our executive committee. One of the biggest donors to the party of not just time, but talent and treasure to the party. And she was still called, as conservative as she was. She got endorsed by the local party that enraged some folks because she was a former Democrat, but she got treated so terribly by some folks because she was a Democrat before. And I've made this argument. At what point do we accept people? What is it, a 10-year window? You got to be a 50-year window? Do you got to take 100 lashes with a red Republican whip in order? Like, what do you got to do? At what point do you understand what I'm saying? So I am a yeah, I got you. I mean, but it comes at a price. If we can't, to your point, have our cake and eat it too. We can't say we want to grow the party and then ew, we don't want nobody who is ever a Democrat. And what I find is that the people in the GOP who do the most Democrat stuff are the ones that scream they're the true like it irks me. I might get in trouble for this. I don't care. It irks me. And I said this the other day. I am not God. I don't have the power to be the arbiter of what the true conservative is. I know what the GOP platform says. I know that most of the people around me agree with most of the platform. I'm good with that. I don't need to go beyond that. Now, I'm not going to accept somebody saying they're a Republican, but they're, pro, late stage abortion. Now that we going to have a fundamental disagreement on. And I wouldn't want you on my executive committee, if you're doing stuff like that. But this idea, to your point, about us being willing to take people in that have been on the other side, if we were smart, we would want those people. They're the greatest salesmen that we have. I've never been a registered Democrat. I don't know where people get this idea of me being a registered Democrat, but I know what it's like to be on the left, and we need those people.
Yeah, the power of the convert. I mean, it's like saying to Paul, yeah, but you were Saul.
Perfect cow. You know what? No, we know the road to Damascus thing. We got you, bro. But nah, man, you just
yeah. I think those scales are coming back. I can't listen to you. Yeah,
yeah. Well, look, I think one of the biggest things that we can do, though, and this is something I'm experiencing this in this vice chair's race, and we as people who have that level-headedness have to stay involved. And look, let me just say this. So the solution is this. I don't know if this works for everybody, but at least this is what I come up with. I've been given the ability to take myself out of my shoes and look at the world in somebody else's shoes. So for me, the Bible tells me I gotta love everybody. I gotta find a way to love, I have to figure that out. So if somebody hates me or feels a certain way about me, what I do is I go completely out of me and I jump into, let's just say, middle-aged white lady from the South mode. And I go, well, where did you go to school? You probably went to school down here. What were you taught? Where were you taught this? You probably didn't grow. You grew up a certain way, which gives you a certain worldview, which I understand. I totally understand your panic when you see a name Addul Ali, when all you watch is Muslim or terrorist, anybody with that name. I get it. When you grew up watching movies, and you can watch this compilation. There's a saying that used to come up in movies in the late 40s and 50s, and even into the early 60s. You might have heard this line in movies before. And it was always said by white ladies in the movie. Tell me if you ever heard this. Well, I'm free, white, and 21. That was it. Look that up. There is a saying in the movies. You can look up a compilation. So I'm okay with understanding that a lot of our folks grew up, that's what you heard in your movies. That was the mentality. You might not, I'm not calling you a racist. I'm not saying you don't like black people. You just grew up in a mind state and in a world where you're not used to anybody saying no to you, telling you what you can't do. That's not just a Democrat thing, that's a people thing. So I feel for the folks that have these weird views on our side, and I just put myself in their shoes and go, no wonder you think that way.
So let me, and we're getting really specific here, but you're triggering, not triggering. You're sparking some thoughts in my mind. So one of the things we've seen demonstrated so powerfully is how important messaging is, how powerful just repetition is. All the people that are convinced of things that are just not consistent with reality. People who will, people who, I want my 8th booster for my 5-year-old kind of thing. You're talking about unwinding people's internal messaging or messaging from their past through putting yourself in their position and then trying to approach them in the way that is empathetic to that. How does that work? In other words, it starts with an internal thing of having the intention to connect to that person. But on the flip side of that, I find that within the Republican Party, there's this deathly politeness to the point of when there are certain serious issues within the party, nobody wants to talk about it, even the people who are aggrieved by it, because there seems to be within the establishment, and I also, voted Democrat most of my life until I woke up one day and I was like, these people have lost their minds.
Right.
And then once I realized that they'd lost their minds, I was like, oh, I was kind of crazy too. You know how these things develop, and you go, well, I'm going to take this part of the dinner plate, but I'm not going to, that thing's a little tough. For me, like the abortion thing, it was so drilled into me for years and years. Like, you will never, the real messaging, like in college, was like, you'll never get laid. If you're pro-life, you will never, ever. So anyway,
wow.
I appreciate that you've said this will probably get me in trouble a bunch of times. Gives me a little freedom here to speak my mind. But okay, we have this one side of it, which is this empathy and compassion, put myself in the person's shoes and not take it personally if they react to me in a way that is unfair to me, right? That prejudges me in some way. However, within that same culture, with that deathly politeness, where there are things like in New Hanover County where in my podcast so far, I've talked about malfeasance, I've talked about potential violations of election law and stuff like this. And in the lead up to our county convention, there were people who were like, well, I just want to keep the message positive. And I felt like, okay, we can keep the message positive, but if, Trump said it best, if we can't talk about a problem, we can't solve it. So
Facts.
what's your perspective on that other side of it? How do we break the culture of not talking about the hard things within the party that need to be talked about?
So here's my take on this, and this is real simple. Sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you. Okay. We have to get past the point. Okay. I always use this as an example. I always go back to the framers of the Constitution. The arguments that these men were having about some of the most important issues, well, the most important issues of the day, for them to only turn around after arguing like cats and dogs and fighting to go next door and get a beer. You understand what I'm saying? So I am of that ilk. But here's the other problem that I think we have, and I'm guilty of this. So I'm very passionate about what we're doing with the GOP and about politics and about ensuring that we're doing the right thing. So there has to come a point internally. And the problem I think we have as a GOP is doing this internally. To your point about like the uber politeness and all of that stuff, I don't have that bone in my body. Like I'm not going to talk to somebody I don't want to talk to. I'm not going to stand here and, and I'm just not going to do that. Especially if we're not, and I say this as respectfully as I can. The problem with that uber politeness is a lot of times is it's BSing people. It's if you're gonna BS me to the point of smiling in my face and acting like we cool, what else are you gonna BS me about? So I don't my personal is I don't do that. But here's what I do think we can do. This is the biggest problem we have. So listen, on Sundays at the convention, when the executive committee meets, normally people be ready to get on out of town. They be ready to be out, right? That's when the work actually starts. We have to start setting the expectation that we need to be the actual work of the party is for us to go into our executive committee meetings, to go into our platform committee meetings, to go into our whatever that meeting is, and to fight like cats and dogs about our ideas, and then to leave from that unified. One thing that I'm really proud about, especially with my executive committee that we had the last 2 years, it was probably one of the most diverse executive committees, not just in skin color, not just in age, not just in sex, but in thought process, in skill set. We argued about some very important local steps the party had to take in relation to fairs being canceled and things like that. And when I say we argued, bro, we argued. But when we were done, we moved so well together. We moved forward together so well, and everybody did it respectfully. I think that's the point we've got to get to internally as a party, is having these conversations and doing it respectfully. The last thing I'll say on this point, when we look at how much energy is put into attacking each other as Republicans, that same level of smoke don't go to the Democrats. We don't give them that same level of smoke. That same level of tear each other down for some. It weirds me out when I hear people say things like, that county party chairman's trying to hold on to power, and I'm going, you don't know what a county party chair don't really got. All the power you got is Robert's Rules of Order, really. I mean, you get a bunch of work and some other stuff, but the idea is that we need to be able, the leadership of our state party, number one, I think it starts there, and then our county party chairs and those folks, we have to be able and be willing to stay in the room as long as it takes to solve whatever the internal problem, issue, discussion is. And then I think we also need to be willing. I wouldn't be as mad about the internal fighting as if we was giving that same level of smoke to the Democrats. Like if we were beating up our enemy as much as we was beating up each other, like if the Democrats looked as bad as some of our Republicans do, I'm down with that. But here's what you do. And this is a simple thing. I did it in my county. You have to create a culture of we fight like cats and dogs at home, but when we leave out the house, we unified on the same page.
Excellent. Last thing, you got so deep, and I love the depth of the answers here. Just to pick on something you said before and to put it into the context of that answer, you're saying A healthier debate is of necessity going to be a more uncomfortable debate. So it's good to fight like cats and dogs because we care about the issues. But let's really, you mentioned earlier an ideological limit to that. So, what are your ideological limits to that? You mentioned, I forget what the example was. You mentioned the abortion thing. You know, if you can call yourself a Republican, but if you're for, second term abortion, maybe not.
Yeah, maybe you don't need to be leading the party, right? Like if you're not in line with the platform, I just throw a number 95%. I'm good with you being a Republican. I'm good with you being involved, but I don't know, me personally, that I want somebody that I am that ideologically apart from leading the organization. To me, that's a different, maybe a distinction without a difference, but there's a to me, if you're going to be a leader in the party, you should buy into most, if not all, of the platform that we say we stand on.
So if we were to call that an ideological red line, what would be your red line issues?
So number one, you're not going to tell me that boys can become girls. Like, we're not doing that. No, we're not doing that. We're not going to, ever cross the line where the government has control of the church and telling churches what to do, and any religion for that matter. We're not going to cross the line on abortion. I believe that life begins at conception. I believe that, we should get a bill as close to that. I believe that, like most Republicans, I believe that the hold on, let me dead that. Like most Republicans do, I believe that the exceptions, rape, incest, and the life of the mother are reasonable exceptions. But this late stage abortion is a red line for me. No, you should not be able to kill a baby once it is born. Like, if it is born alive and it can get help, you should help that baby. I'm not going to allow any red flag laws. I have zero interest in the government telling me how many weapons I can have, what weapons I can have. I think we already have, federal background checks are good. I'm happy with what we just saw out of our legislature. And then, last but not least, I certainly believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. I'm cool if y'all want to do domestic partnership. I'm good with that. Y'all want to do civil unions. I'm cool with that. But just my personal conviction as a Christian, and what I believe is that, marriage is between a man and a woman. I mean, so, those are my issues that where I'm like, nah, you can have some variation on that, but would I want you being the chairman of the state party? Probably not.
Very good. Now we're coming up on 50 minutes. I have all the time in the world. You're a much busier man than I am. How long do you want to go?
I'm enjoying the conversation, bro.
I'm having a great time.
So we're rolling.
Okay, great. So in that case, I will indulge myself and take a step way back, and just go back into your history a little bit. How important was your experience in the military to your development? And also, was that something that your brother did with you, or at the same time, or in parallel, or?
So while I went off to the military, my brother was traveling the world with probably the biggest R&B group in the planet at that time, Jodeci. My brother was at 13 years old, 14. Yeah. So and he tells the story way better than I do. But let's just put it this way: at 14, my brother was traveling the world with Jodeci. He got kicked out of high school and he hit the road. And when I turned 17 and graduated, I beelined off to the Army. I'll put it this way. I recently got back with one of my drill sergeants, 35 years later or so, however many years later. And I found him on Facebook and I sent him a message and I said, "Hey, I saw you retired as a command sergeant major. I'm really proud of you. You made me the man I am today. The discipline you instilled and the trust in my ability to lead was sparked there in basic training." And it was anybody that's been to basic or boot camp will tell you their drill sergeants hold a very special place in their heart. And he said, "Listen, to see that you're a Christian and a conservative and that you're fighting for the GOP tells me that I did my job." And that for me, it was a heart melter. I'm not Anybody who's been in basic training knows what I'm saying. You fear your drill sergeants, but there's a love and a respect you have for them after the fact. And, for me, it was the first time I'd actually left New York. So I had met people from around the country, people from Texas and Little Rock, Arkansas and California. And so it gave me an opportunity that maybe I would have been a different person if I went to college. But for me, that was my college. That was my experience. And so while my brother's off doing the music thing, I'm doing the military thing. And then when I came home, it was interesting because people were like, "Yo, we thought you died." I'm like, "What?" Because that you one day you're there and then you're gone. Nobody sees you for 4 years, and they're like, "What happened?" So you come back all chiseled up in military, and they're like, "Oh, we thought you died." No, but I didn't make it long in New York after that. I was down here like a year after I got out doing the music because I did the music thing too. I got a record deal when I got out, and that's what led me to North Carolina.
Wait. We can't skip this. What's the first album called?
We did an album. Oh my gosh, what was that? The first album was called 55th. 55th, the Light Form Soldier. You can't find it anywhere anymore because this is 1999.
Oh, come on.
It's like there's nowhere to find it. But what we did,
and what?
It was 55th was my rap name, and I got that because I was always 5'5.5". So I always would walk around with a fifth of gin in my back pocket. So
boy.
Yeah. But that's what caused me to move down here was I got out of the military. I was doing the music thing. I came down to Charlotte and performed that for Sisters Only, and that's where I met my wife and kids. And for a few years, that's why I was like this with the blinders on. Work homeschool, got into the lodge, got on the Community Development Commission, and then all of this political awareness happening. So
just I have to ask, give me the quick transition between rap artist to joining the Masonry Lodge.
So when Tasha told me she was pregnant with my daughter, my first thing was, I do not want to be a rapper. My first thought was,
wow,
I'm not making enough money to pay for a baby right now. Like I'm making enough money to drive around in a car and, but not to take care of a baby. So it took a while. I started working in call centers and all kind of stuff, just whatever work I could do. Whatever I could get, and eventually started some small businesses, like I said, some landscaping and some tow trucking and all that kind of stuff. But the transition wasn't that hard in that I'd already been used to working. You know what I mean? Like my record deal wasn't like a dream record deal. It was more like walking hundreds of blocks every day, going to different labels. And this is before this is where CDs were still a thing. Like there was no real internet. Like I think we might have just been MySpace wasn't even a thing in 1999.
No, that was post 2000.
That was pre 2000.
So did you ever do the DVDs or CDs out of the back of your car?
That is exactly what we did. And I have friends there, people. Yeah, when I say grinding, I'll never forget it when I first heard a song we had called Crazy on the Block. It was playing on Power 98. DJ Stretch-O-Matic was the DJ. DJ Stretch-O-Matic. Shouts out to Stretch. So here's the funny thing is DJ Stretch-O-Matic, who I hadn't met from a can of paint, right, was playing our record on Power 98, became really good friends with him and some other people. Years later, my dad came down from New York and brings me to his dad's friend. So my grandfather's friend's house. Turns out it was DJ Stretch-O-Matic's dad.
Whoa.
So his dad and my dad's friend were like my grandfather were friends. Like it was the weirdest thing on the planet. Like just to see how life had made so many people like that close to me. It was just weird. Yeah. So the music thing and I'll tell you when it wasn't moving to Charlotte that got me out of the music business for good. It was actually doing a show in Connecticut in 1999 with Ja Rule, Jagged Edge. He was the biggest thing on the planet. We were up in Connecticut, and if you dig enough, you can find this. A Ja Rule performance turns into a riot. So we performed. That was my last big performance, was in Connecticut. There were like 20,000 people in this park. They were all singing my song. And then Ja Rule comes out behind stage and he yells, "It's murder." And pandemonium ensues. Gas masks with, gas canisters are flying. Like the people just rioted. But so that night after that show, I'm just telling you how I got decided the music business was not for me. So I that night we go back to the hotel. We're on the same floor as Jagged Edge. There's just, forgive me for saying it, just groupies everywhere. There's drugs and
Sure.
it's just the music business. And it's
The
like
life.
3 in the morning, 2, 3 in the morning. And we're sitting there like, yo, even though we're in here with these guys, we don't got that kind of money. So we're looking for like room service is like $25 for some chicken tenders. We're like, nah. So I tell my guy, I said, look, I'm gonna walk downstairs and I'm gonna find something to eat. He says, yo, don't go anywhere by yourself. Now I couldn't find my hitter, my dude that I brought with me, kind of my bodyguard dude. I couldn't find him. So
Sure.
me and the other artists, we just decided we're gonna walk downstairs. There's gotta be something. We walk for a couple of blocks, we find this store, but right next to the store was a club. And so we walk in the store, it's like a Spanish bodega. We get a chicken sandwich, some chips, $10 dinner, right? And when we walk out of this club, now keep in mind, there's my face is all over these billboards, and I've got my pictures are on signs everywhere. And when we get out of the store, the club lets out, and all of these people are now outside. And somebody goes, yo, that's 55th right there, while we're walking out of the store. And the only thing that I could think of was, I don't got no gun. I don't know none of these people. It's just me and Corey. If this goes bad, it's going to go all the way bad. Fortunately, I got enough hood spider sensors to keep it funky enough to kind of sign the autographs, dap everybody up. This was no cell phone camera, so it wasn't like a bunch of selfies and stuff like that. It was more like sign the paper, dap me up, sign my man's CD for me because I got your CD in the car. I'm coming right back. But I was terrified. I'm not gonna front. Because I remember I'm out of the military, and in my brain, I'm like, I have no escape route. I have no weapon. The rules of engagement here, I'm dead if this goes wrong. So I realized that the music business, I wasn't cut out for that kind of pressure. I was like, nah, I'm good. I'm good. That was the night my brother got taken out of it. Like, it wasn't for me.
And you must have thought of your wife at that moment too.
Well, I was younger and more reckless. That wasn't the thought. My thought was self-preservation. That moment of uncomfortability. I'm just being honest. You would think that was my first thought, but that wasn't. I'll never forget it. Like, yo, what if I don't get out of here? Like, it wasn't, what if I don't get back to my son and my daughter? It was like, what if they think I'm with just all these thoughts. But what I also realized at that point was, it wasn't for me. That there was some other things that were going on, but that music thing wasn't. My brother was more cut out for that. He had dealt with that world. I was more of the army dude. Not for lack of a better way to say it, we worked for the record deal, but it was like we kind of lucked into it because my man knew somebody that knew somebody, and it was just like, I think that was formative for me because I didn't have the same level of stage fright that some people have in public speaking. So I came into politics already not afraid of being in front of a group of people, and kind of, you still get the flutter of the heart no matter what happens, right? But I wasn't like I didn't have stage fright. I wasn't terrified. So I think that was also helpful for me.
Yeah. I think with any career like that, you realize you got to be 100% in. You can't be 87% isn't any, 96% doesn't work. Has to be 100% to deal with that kind of thing. Real quick before we come back to the present,
Okay.
how does the reunion with your brother happen?
So we were back at LaSalle School. They both end up putting us in 2 separate foster homes. We were in for a while, and then he ended up getting sent up there to LaSalle, and then I got in some trouble at one. And they were like, we might as well just put them both up there. And one day they put us in a room and it was like, yo, here's your brother. And it's like, what up, bro? We back. So he's on one side and I'm on one side, and it was just kind of like, I remember the first couple of days we were there, they put us together and we ended up causing a riot over the milks. Like, because, okay, it's this facility with, like, on one building, there's 5 floors and 10 rooms with 4 bunks in each room. And it's just kids. So you got senior tiers, which are the 17 to 20, 17 to 19. And then you have the junior tiers, and they put, the 14 to 16 kids. So they used to at night put a lock on the refrigerator so you couldn't go get a carton of milk. And I remember being thirsty, and me and my brother, like, we're just getting back together and we're trying to talk and we're thirsty. And we like, yo, come take the thing off the milk so that we could get some milk. And the guy was like, nah, go to bed. You ain't getting no, like, we turned the place out, but they took the locks off. Like, they end up taking the locks off, but they separated us in the facility after that. They were like, nah, we can't put these two. You can't put these two together. Because I mean, it was a full scale riot in there over the milk. I wanted my strawberry milk, all right?
Wow, and the two of you are very persuasive together, even back then. So there wasn't another separation after that. From then on out, you guys were in communication.
I mean, when we got out of LaSalle school and he was off doing the music thing, and I was off doing the military thing, there was that, like, we weren't as, our relationship then wasn't what it is now.
But you were in communication.
Yeah, as much as you could without cell phones and pagers and all that thing, and pagers. Oh my God.
Sure. Well, I filled out a lot of the backstory, which I really wanted, and I think people should be interested to hear, if nothing else, to marvel at the story. It's, in my opinion, a great American story. I don't know how to say it exactly. Let me go on to the next question.
Okay, so, that's fair.
let's jump right back into, but thank you for sharing it. I really appreciate it. So how hard is it to get people off the couch to get in a state GOP vice chair race? And why should they get off the couch for that? And what is your strategy to get them off the couch?
So the strategy simple is I'm going to be at every county that I can possibly be at. I'm going to be doing some donuts with the delegates type events, inviting you delegates that are watching this to come out and sit down face to face with me and have a conversation. I think now more than ever, especially given the fact that we are outnumbered by unaffiliated and we are outnumbered by Democrat voters, it's more important for registered Republicans who care about the party to come out. Number one, because the people that you sit up there in Raleigh, up at the GOP offices, are going to help make decisions that are going to shape the way our state moves. I think that given the relationships that I built, and here I am going to the political pitch, right? But it says something that I'm endorsed by the state Senate majority leader. It says something that I'm endorsed by the deputy minority whip. It says something that I'm endorsed by and handpicked as a candidate. We talk about quality candidate recruitment. I handpicked a candidate that is now the freshman leader in the state house. We have to, as Republicans, if we're, and I say this as respectfully as I can, if we are going to continue to be the party of Lincoln, if we're going to continue to be the party of Frederick Douglass, if we're going to continue to be the party that fought for the right to vote and ended slavery and did all those great things, that doesn't happen sitting on the couch. You don't have the luxury of complaining of how bad the GOP is if you sat your narrow black tail or white tail or whatever tail it is at the house. You don't get the luxury of that complaint. The other thing that I think is really crucial, we always talk about getting Republicans elected. We got to get Republicans elected. We got to get Republicans elected. A big part of that for me is adding to that sentence. We got to get Republicans elected that will vote in line with our platform. I think there needs to be an addition to that. I think that the other part of this, and I'll stop here because I know where I'm going to go with this, but
I'm going to take you back there anyway. But
okay, so check this out. A big major reason why people have to get up off their couches and get involved and come to state convention and vote is because of exactly what we saw with Tom Tillis and all of the counties, over I think almost 40 counties, censured him over his marriage amendment vote. If the federal and state elected officials don't have strong Republican leaders that they can communicate with, and if the party, and I'll give you a prime example, what I mean by this, if the GOP would have had strong enough leadership to get Tom Tillis on the phone to say, hey guys, this vote's coming down the pike. I'm not talking about the whole state executive committee. I'm talking about the central committee. At least get to the central committee, 15 people. I don't know a county chairman, a district chairman. I don't know any of them unless they were having a baby or having a heart surgery or something like that, that wouldn't have stopped what they were doing to get on a call with their U.S. senator to say, hey guys, this marriage bill is coming down. this is why I'm going to vote this way. This is why I have to do this. This is what you need to understand. Get this out to the folks. If Republican leaders would have been able to communicate, I think, with the constituency about why these votes were coming down, we wouldn't have seen the vitriol and the anger that we have for some of our elected officials. So that said, it becomes incumbent on people to get involved so that we have leaders who are thinking this way, who want to make sure that we have every opportunity. You don't get to just run for my vote as a Republican, get up there and then say, screw you. No, we have to make sure we're continuously involved so that we have a mechanism to hold these folks accountable, and they know that they're going to have party leadership that won't be quiet. And for the record, I'm my county, we led the way. We did, on that marriage amendment, agree or disagree. There's, reasonable people on both sides, but we believe in the platform. So my county, we censured on that marriage amendment because that's what we believe. So I think that's why you got to come to convention. You got to get involved. Don't sit on the couch.
Very good. You're running against incumbent Susan Mills. How would you assess her record, and what would you do differently?
So I've made it publicly clear, and I've told Susan personally that I think with her vision, what her vision of was for the vice chair seat, I believe that she, in her mind, has accomplished that, and I respect that. I think that it is a very respectable thing for her to be a teacher, and I think we need conservatives in the classroom. I just have a different vision for the seat, one that is more visible, in that we need to use that seat and the platform that comes with being the number 2 Republican in the state more effectively to communicate in areas where we're not competing. I think that's one difference. The second thing is, as races tend to get more internal races and primaries tend to be nastier. One of the things I've told Susan is I'm going to run a positive campaign. I'm going to continue to talk about the merits of what my vision is for that seat, how I'd like to create an urban engagement task force within the GOP to strategically work with our urban chairman, and how I would like to increase the communication, and improve communication. So I think, look, for what her vision of the job was, if she feels like she's accomplished that, I'm happy for it. I'm appreciative of the work that she's done, but just have a different vision.
Well, it sounds like you think you have a more actionable plan to expand the party. Just to help people out, and this includes me, who aren't clear on, I hear you saying that you need to use it as the position as more of a bully pulpit, that you need to use it as a platform. That's its main source of power. And what exactly, just for people who don't know, duties of the vice chair at the state level?
So the interesting thing about this is that it is almost, I love the analogy, like you said, it's like a bully pulpit. It's almost like the lieutenant governor's seat. So what the state plan says is that the vice chair shall serve as an assistant to the state party chairman and act in his absence. Will also serve as a liaison between the state party and the state chairman and vice chairs, and also direct party events and serve at whatever process the state executive committee. So it doesn't really give you you're responsible for this, this, and this. It just says coordinate party events, serve as a liaison between the state party and the county chair. So I really believe that that gives you the leeway to present to the state executive committee an actionable plan for our urban areas, something we haven't seen yet. But that's what that's kind of what it says. You really don't have a job description. It just says, tell us what you want to do with it and then execute.
Well, certainly the liaison to the county chairs gives us an avenue for building ground up networks, which is something which I think is something that we need to think about doing better in the Republican Party.
Well, I will say this, and I mean, truth be told, and a lot of folks, if you're, I've been in 74 counties at this point. I've actually coordinated and done events in 34 counties, actually on the ground, worked tangibly with county chairs and groups. So, that's not something I'm not already doing.
So we're well prepared for the job. This is sort of a quick fire one, building up to, you've said several times, this is going to get me in trouble. I think I'm building up to the question that will get you in trouble.
Okay.
In case you were worried that you hadn't done it already. Here it comes. Where is the GOP winning in North Carolina? Where is it losing? How can it do better?
I think we're winning in our ability to get state level folks elected. You look at what we did with Ted Budd. You look at what we did with our Supreme Court race and what we did with our Court of Appeals. I think we're definitely winning when it comes to our law and order messaging and to ensuring that we keeping the base where it's supposed to be. I think we're definitely winning. Where we're losing is we're not as effective with our unaffiliated and our urban voters, and that's something we definitely need to put a concerted effort into. So winning and losing. And what was the last part?
How would you do it, or what would you change? I think you addressed that.
Yeah.
So you
And one
mentioned the
thing.
base.
Okay. Mhm.
No, go ahead. Finish, please.
No. I'll stop there.
Okay. You mentioned the base, and in my opinion, I think that the greatest energy in the American political base now resides in the grassroots wing of the Republican Party. It's not clear to me that the Republican establishment has learned how to access, incorporate, and take advantage of that energy fully. And I
Mhm.
think the time is right for the message of republicanism. And I don't just mean the Republican Party, but small r republicanism, meaning, community empowerment and
Right.
a voter up sort of power structure. Not that you don't need hierarchies, but that the voices of the base are heard and respected.
Right.
Specifically, we have certain values. We're against tyranny, right? We're value local rule, we value free speech, we value the right to life. And there have been some successes on the core issues. Just last
Right.
week, we had the repeal of the pistol permit. Just this week, we had the HB 533, the Human Life Protection Act, was brought to the floor of the House. Yes.
Shouts out to Keith Kidwell.
However, GOP candidates got more money from the RNC than from the NCGOP. In 2022, the majority fund raised over $8 million, spent over $11 million, and the largest single contributor to the fund is one man, State Senator Phil Berger, who has donated over $2 million. Over $1.1 million of that went to help our state senator from New Hanover County, Michael Lee, win his race in 2022, a man who says he will not consider pushing the abortion ban below 12 weeks. So, my question to you is, are the mechanics and the habits of the GOP irredeemably top-down, command and control, and geared towards serving moneyed interests over the most cherished values of the rank and file? And if they aren't, how do you plan to fix them? And if they can't be fixed, how long can the GOP survive if it continues to create its own base?
So look, I happen to be one of those grassroots people, but I also, if you let some folks tell it, happen to be one of those establishment people. So I think what we've got to do internally, first and foremost, is recognize is that when the goals of the grassroots and the goals of the donor class line up, everything's perfect. We're in paradise, all firing on all cylinders. Sometimes the agenda of the donor class and the agenda of the grassroots, we'll call it, those things don't line up. What I found out in my first few years, on my local executive committee and dealing with this, and the distinction that I saw was the thinking of a person on payroll versus the thinking of a person that has to make payroll. And it's about trying to figure out how to bridge that gap there. And that's essentially the same paradox we're faced with within the GOP. I think what we have to do is number one, if we can become self-sufficient in our fundraising so as not to have to take the RNC agenda, whatever that may be, and say, hey, we have control of our own economic direction as a state party, and this is how we want to do our messaging. This is where we want to focus on. Then that's one side of it, and I think that's important to it. I think that given the fact that we're not, we would be naive to think that money is going to somehow leave politics. It's never going to leave politics. It's going to be an important part of the game going forward. But I think where we have to find the in North Carolina more specifically, I don't want to talk about the big etheric RNC picture, but here in North Carolina, the grassroots, you don't win without the grassroots. You just don't win without them. I think that it's interesting to me to hear certain folks say, well, we did the X amount of million voter contacts, we did X amount of this, and that speech sounds great. But the mass majority of the people knocking doors, making phone calls, manning polling locations, they're not getting paid. They're not out there, getting money. So I think that what we need to do as a state party, number one, is we need to recognize that if we are going to take money from the RNC, we need to have a little bit more control of how, where, and the dynamics of where that money was spent. And I'll use this as a prime example. To open up a Black engagement center in Greensboro, have it there during the election cycle, and then close it. Why did we even do that? What was it served no purpose. It sounded good for Ronna McDaniels and crew to say on TV, look, we've got a Black engagement center. But then to turn around and then end it, what does that say to the community that you put the center in?
We only think about y'all not doing it in the first place.
You might as well just not do it. So I think that we've got to become self-sufficient economically as a party. And I think one of the things that for me, as somebody that has had to raise money, people don't care as a chairman. They told me this when I first got involved. They said, look, don't be the activist chairman. Okay. 99% of your job as a county party chairman is to raise the money you're going to need to operate the party. So you can be the activist guy all you want, but if you're not going to raise money, nobody cares. So I think that we've got to accept the fact that, yes, there's a economic component, because the flyers don't pay for themselves, the mailers don't pay for themselves, the robocalls don't pay for themselves, and sure. But the fact of the matter is, the top-down leadership needs to be supportive of our county chairs. They need to be supportive of our precinct chairs, and I think that's the level of organization you've got to have, is down to the precinct level, where we're empowering. And in my county, this is what I told all of my precinct chairs: do whatever you want to do, we'll pay for it. You want to do the precinct cookout, the hangout with it, we'll pay for it. That's our job. So I think the more we can get our leadership back to understanding, you can deal with the agenda of the donor class, right? Now, I'm a little bothered, a lot bothered, that one person would be able to contribute so much money to sway, and because I know the influence that comes with money. So I think the more we as the grassroots can also become the donor class. Now, I was talking to a good friend of mine about this the other day. If you've given $10 to the GOP, you are the donor class, okay? You don't get to opt out of that. If you are the type of person that has participated over the last 3 to 5 years in doing things for you are the establishment. You've been around. You're you. So we got to do away with those labels.
You're breaking my heart.
Well, I mean, look, I first, when they were like, "Yo, you're the establishment," and then I was like, "Yeah, technically, yeah, okay, yeah, sure." If we want to take that connotation with it, that negative connotation with the term, but I think to your immediate point about that is, once we get people who understand the business class of folks and the grassroots of people. So I'm the guy that's used to owning a company and towing the cars. I would never ask my guys to do a job that I would never do. I would pick days that were rainy and cold and jacked up, and those would be the days I would go get out on a truck. The toughest days would be the days the hottest days would be the ones I'll go out there with my landscaping crew and go cut grass. That's what the people want to see. And I think that's how we fix that, is we get leaders who know what it's like to be the grassroots, and is not so far removed. Not 10 years ago, you were the this, that, or the third, but last year you did that. And, in this current political climate, I think there's also, and I won't even go off on this tangent, but there's also a technology gap that I think is happening. When you look at the people, there's just a technology gap that we've got to deal with internally, in our ability to get people in that can use some of this technology to help us.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That I think they need some young people in there, and I don't mean people our age.
Hey, look, I got this gray going on down here. I earned it. I'll be 40. I'll be 45 this year. And one of the things that I was just so proud over the last 2 years is our Cabarrus YRs. We had one of the best YR chapters in the state, and it's about building that bench. And there's some talk about, oh, we're bringing these young people in, and they've got these different ideas. Yes, they do. They do have different ideas. They do want us. One of my guys got in big trouble because he had a panel about conservative environmentalism. And my argument was simple. If we don't join the conversation about environmentalism, it's going to continue to be a leftist dominated conversation. And we're going to lose people who would otherwise be on our side. I thought conservatives were about conserving the environment too. We need to conserve the clean water and the trees and I think being able to bridge the gap between having conversations that people identify as on the left. No, we need to be able to have that, bring young people in who've got these new ideas. And I think that'll help bridge that gap between the donor class and the grassroots.
Excellent. Well, we're coming up on an hour and a half. I feel like it's been a great conversation. Thank you for all the time you've given and the great insights. And I'm excited to have you as a candidate. Is there anything that you'd like to leave the voters with? A final message, or tell them about upcoming events, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing folks. I'll be across the state. I know I'll be coming back to New Hanover County before convention, so just look out for that. The one thing that I always tell people whenever I give a speech, my leadership philosophy comes out of the Bible, and it's Proverbs 14:23, and that says, all hard work brings a profit, but mere talk leads only to ruin. So I ask people to not just talk about it. Let's just be about it, and I hope to see you at convention.
Thanks so much. We really appreciate having you on. I really appreciate it. I don't know why I said we.
Well, hopefully the audience will appreciate it. There we go.
Wow, what a great episode. Thanks again to Addul Ali, former chair of the Cabarrus County GOP and current candidate for the NCGOP vice chair. If you haven't met him already, I'm sure you'll see him on the campaign trail soon. If he's not coming to your town anytime soon, check him out at tuconservative.com. He has a daily podcast, which, as I said, is a lot of fun and very informative. Check him out there and on the campaign trail. Now, since the beginning of this podcast, I have been talking about getting local advertisers on the show, and it finally occurred to me, brilliant idea, that I have something I could advertise on the show. One of my other hats is stage actor, and I have a one-man